And finally, we have Fishing for Fantasy, when we're going to tell you who to pick up off of those waiver wires to ensure that you lose this week by 1 point. Up first, we have quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Now, yes, he struggled against the number one defense in the NFL this week, as most teams have, let's be honest. But 21 points and 26 points in the previous 2 weeks. This week, he is against Houston. Houston, always a good matchup. Consider picking up Tua.
I am recommending this person under duress. Please, please save me. But QB, another pickup, elite Jets quarterback, Mike White. Dare we? He just had a 400-yard game against a decent defense. He's got the starting spot for now. Who is Zach Wilson? A bust. We don't care. Go back to Utah. He threw touchdowns. He caught a touchdown. I don't expect him to catch touchdowns every single game, but Mike White is the best the Jets offense has looked this year. And that Jets pass-catching core, when healthy, is not horrible. Corey Davis, Jamison Crowder, Elijah Moore. What happened to Denzel Mims? I don't know. But Michael Carter, it's not the worst matchup. They beat the 6-2 Titans. They beat the 5-3 Bengals. Colts defense has been He's a useful stash going forward, though. In weeks 11, 12, 15, and 16, he faces Miami, Houston, Jacksonville, and we really still don't know the severity of Zach Wilson's injury. He's not going on IR, but he's projected to miss at least 3 or 4 weeks. So useful quarterback stash if you're in a pinch.
I'm going to go ahead and recommend our first running back of the week. It's going to be Jeremy Mcnichols. He's only owned in 1.9% of leagues, but with Derrick Henry going down, I mean, honestly, it's probably the number one choice that you can make. He's one of the best options out there, especially after Darrington Evans went on IR with another injury, unfortunately. So he has the pass-catching upside, and I get that AP is signed to the team, but AP is like 450 years old. So I expect Jeremy Mcnichols to have some fresher legs and a better opportunity, especially after being cut early in his career and not receiving a lot of touches until like the last year or so. And a lot is context there, my friends.
Up next, we have running back Boston Scott for the Philadelphia Eagles. This past week, he had 12 carries for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns versus the Lions. He was the primary ball carrier. He got 1 target. Gainwell is still primarily being used as a scat back. We apologize for that call last week. We kind of thought that he was going to be the one getting the lead reps. So did NFL Fantasy, by the way. Thank you for jeerbaiting my girlfriend into picking him up and putting him as a starter with that over 19-point projection for Kenneth Gainwell. By the way, higher than Austin Eckler. So shout out to NFL Fantasy for whatever drugs you guys are doing over there. Holy crap. He ended up getting like 2 points or whatever, and my girlfriend had Joe Mixon on the bench, so she was pretty upset. Don't know what that was about, but Boston Scott appears to be the one who's going to be picking up for Miles Sanders, assuming he stays out. Fairly soft matchup against the Chargers next week. As we said, they cannot stop anything when it comes through as a run. They are the second worst. The only worst team is the Texans. That's not company that you want to keep. So Boston Scott. And up next, we're going to tell you about another Eagles running back.
Yeah, next up, we have Jordan Howard. This is really, really only if you are hurting severely for a running back. So Jordan Howard had 12 carries for 57 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Lions. That really was game script dependent. I don't know. I don't think the Eagles are going to be blowing anybody out. But once again, the Kenneth Gainwell usage is a little bit concerning. He's not going to be getting a lot of carries. He seems to be primarily getting that passing work. And I'm not saying pick up Jordan Howard and start him this week, but pick up Jordan Howard, game script dependent. He's a decent spot start. This is more for really, really deep leagues, though.
Next up, we have a wide receiver, Mr. Elijah Moore for the New York Jets. He's only owned in 11.8% of leagues or rostered in 11.8% of leagues. But with Corey Davis down with a hip injury, coming off, I don't know, arguably what's potentially going to be like a bit of a dry spell for him, I think. And then we have Moore, who's coming back with back-to-back 6-target games. I mean, he's a rookie. Everybody was talking him up in the preseason. A.J. Brown literally said that he would have bet his entire year's salary that Elijah Moore was going to make All-Pro. Obviously, that didn't happen. And it's not going to happen. But the dude's got talent, nonetheless. And it might be time to pick him up before somebody else does, because I have a feeling that his blow-up game will be coming here in the next couple weeks. So don't sleep on Elijah Moore. Definitely worth a late bench kind of stash position. Rob, what about your guy? Who's next?
All right, so much to Zach's woe, I have chosen Cole Beasley of the Buffalo Bills. Now, Beasley has had a rough few games this year. He had a rough few games last year. He is one of those weird enigmas who just can't seem to figure out if he's a consistent contributor or not. The Bills' offense kind of suffers from success in fantasy football, where they are so good that you never really know who's going to be getting the workload. But he has had 3 performances this year over 20 points. He's had 3 games this year with 13 targets in those 3 games. And with all of this, he has only had 1 touchdown on the year. Now, sometimes you can predict touchdowns, and sometimes it's just really a matter of luck. I don't expect him to have this few touchdowns going forward. And when you look at his total number of targets and his performances, I personally expect him to be getting more touchdown opportunities than he has gotten so far. So I think there's more upside to be found. And despite all of this, he's only owned in 60% of leagues, which seems a little bit crazy because I have trouble believing that in these 12-person leagues, you have a better wide receiver core on your bench than Cole Beasley. So look into him, see if he's still available in your league. If he is, he's probably better than one of the wide receivers on your bench. Just consider it.
All right, next up we have deep sleeper wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jamal Agnew. Now, you might be saying, Sergi, Jamal Agnew? I mean, Laviska Shenault is on the team. Marvin Jones is on the team? Jamal Agnew, yes, Jamal Agnew. Urban Meyer, you're making me recommend Jamal Agnew on a fantasy section of the podcast. What is going on here? This is a kick returner. This is a kick returner that for some reason got 12 targets last week. 12 targets. These past 3 weeks, he had 7, 6, 12 targets, resulting in 7.9, 10.3, and 12.8 fantasy points, respectively. The targets are giving him a high floor. And then, unfortunately, once again, the Jacksonville Jaguars are heading into a matchup where they're probably going to get blown out. They're playing the Buffalo Bills. I'm projecting a lot of garbage time. You could really probably throw your dart out at whatever Jacksonville fantasy wide receiver you want. You could throw your dart at Laviska Shenault, who's great after the catch, who's also 6'1", 227 pounds, mauls people when he runs through them. Or you could have your kick returner, but because I'm Urban Meyer and I believe in rational coaching, pick up Jamal Agnew. He's worth a stash, and then if you're hurting for a starter, you could do a lot worse.
To build on that, y'all, if Urban Meyer doesn't care that Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault are on the team, neither should you. Jamal Agnew is the right choice, unfortunately.
Why? That hurts. That hurts.
It does,
Why?
dude. I'm one of the biggest Laviska Shenault stans you'll ever meet. So he's going to be Cordarella 2.0.
Oh,
my next recommendation is Tajay Sharp. Honestly, it is for no major reason other than the fact that with Calvin Ridley stepping away for the foreseeable future, and he's rostered in 0.1% of leagues pre-Calvin news, and Calvin dropped that news in the middle of the game. So considering all of that is thrown in here, I really think that Tajay Sharp, especially considering he ran the same percentage of routes as Russell Gage did in the most recent game. Gage didn't get targets though. Tajay did. So I think that Tajay is probably the best choice going forward if you don't have Kyle Pitts or Cordarrelle Patterson.
Yeah, and I think it took the majority of the snaps out of the slot, so you could do a lot worse than the slot receiver in a Matt Ryan offense. Once again,
100%.
This guy's not going to win you weeks, but he's going to give you a floor at the very least.
Yeah.
For tight ends, our first up is, again, Tyler Conklin from Minnesota, still only owned in 17.8% of leagues. He is not getting touchdowns, but guess what? Neither is the Vikings offense. So part of the problem there, if they can get their act together and realize, hey, we have talent, maybe we should actually, I don't know, win a game once, maybe score some touchdowns, then he will all of a sudden become much more lucrative. But for the time being, he is averaging 5 targets a game, and he is playing against Baltimore this week. And Baltimore, this is going to sound really weird, but Baltimore has been struggling on defense. It doesn't feel right saying that as a Ravens fan, but their defense, maybe it's one of the 500 injuries is affecting us on defense. I'm not sure, but our defense has not looked great. Tight ends have been able to get some things done, so Tyler Conklin from Minnesota.
Next up, keeping with our favorite thing, Jacksonville Jaguars, we've got Dan Arnold. He's only rostered in 3.7% of leagues. Dan Arnold's effectively a wide receiver that plays tight end. He doesn't know what blocking is. He can't block. He just lines up in the slot and goes across the middle of the field. He's 6'6", 240. He got 10 targets this past week. If you're a tight end and you're getting 10 targets, I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. That's like Travis Kelce, Darren Waller levels of target share. So go pick this guy up. And once again, they're playing Buffalo. Josh Allen's about to play Madden against this Jacksonville defense, and it's going to be pretty funny to watch. So when they're down by 30 points in the middle of the second quarter, it's going to be nice showing those pass catchers that they just play against soft coverage and catch everything across the middle of the field.
And on to the defenses. We have 2. I'm going to do the one that I wrote down myself, so that way the actual good recommendation comes from our defense guy, Mr. Rob Sahutsky. My team that I am choosing a defense for, though, and this is a total shot in the dark, it's like if you're like me in my family league where your defense is just kaput and it's on bye this week, I am sincerely looking at the Miami defense. I think that Brian Flores is tired of losing. I also don't think he's going to win a lot of games for the rest of his career before he gets fired. But with that said, they play the Texans this week. Davis Mills has had one pretty awesome game. In every other game, he has had multiple turnovers, been sacked a lot. And those that's exactly what you're looking for whenever you have a fantasy defense. Not necessarily points allowed and yards allowed, but if you have those turnover-worthy plays or those sacks that happen or the forced fumbles, then you're already looking at a better situation. So I think Miami's a good choice there. Rob, finish us off, sir.
All right, I have the Colts. Now, I do want to kind of give a warning that the Colts are actually rostered in about 80% of leagues. They might not be available, just like how the Bills probably aren't going to be available despite their good matchup. The Colts are actually defensive rank 4 in fantasy. Now, the Colts have been a bit of an anomaly, not just this year, but last year as well, where their defense isn't necessarily great, but it brings in a lot of fantasy points for defense based on how the scoring goes. Now, you all know that the best defenses don't often get the most fantasy points. It's usually big play defenses, return touchdowns, etc. So Colts are the 4th ranked defense. They are averaging 8 points, actually a little over 8 points per game, and they are up against the Jets. Now, I know number 5 superstar elite quarterback Mike White is playing, but it's still the Jets, right? And remember, the Jets had that big game against Tennessee, and what happened? They rode that high right into laying an egg the next week. The Jets are still struggling with identity. They're still struggling with a lot of things. The Colts are looking like they're getting their act together. Their defense likely a good play.